Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary, where today we're continuing to work on our clicker game with a twist. The last time we worked on the basics for the game, including, well, the clicking part, as well as the first of several stats that the player could upgrade to improve their clicky output. We also tested my new button system, which will hopefully make future inclusions of mouse-based interactivity a lot easier. Overall, it was a nice start to the project, which allows us to move on to the twist part. So in order to keep the player engaged in our clicker game, we're gonna implement some mini-games. These aren't just any mini-games, rather specific types of games that mostly include the player risking their in-game currency for upgrades and prizes. In other words, gambling. So instead of idling, waiting for the money to roll in, these will hopefully allow the player an alternative to upgrade their stats or earn more money, if RNG is on their side, that is. There's definitely a lot of hypotheticals moving forward, so here's hoping all goes well. First, we needed an array to power our new slot machine. Next was the slot machine function itself. The current stock of prizes would be upgrades to damage and DPS, earning and losing money, and one of those effects being chosen at random. So in the function, each array would be given a random number, then using a weird comparison check that I'll explain in a second, if all entries matched, an effect would occur based on that shared number. To make things easier, a new function was created to specifically target a given variable with values provided via arguments, thus hopefully making everything much more modular for future ease of use. Then back in the slot results, the change function was used to apply the proper effect. And finally, to test this, another button was added to trigger the slot machine function. And that testing was confusing. Matches would occur, but they wouldn't affect the proper target variables. And it's here that I should mention that I was tired going into recording this session, but it wasn't until looking back at the code that I realized just how tired I truly was. So that comparison code was fixed to something more, well, logical at least, and the results were simplified a bit for the sake of testing. This included removing the ability to lose money and simply making the quote-unquote lose function do nothing. Like some sick joke. Anyway, testing resulted in a similar outcome. Only this time, every change was being applied to the DPS variable. And looking back at the code, I realized I'd forgotten to change the reference checks. And I also realized that because the lose result was shifted to the first position, every effect was now one count off. And so after fixing all of those oversights made by my tired brain, we finally had a working slot machine of sorts. It was really tough to test this since my luck is apparently just that abhorrent. However, after many clicks, I was able to verify that the code was working as intended. So a monetary cost was added to the event, requiring 10 money for a single roll. That monetary cost was then passed on to the function, where it was then used to determine just how much a player would make should they land on the money prize. Enums were also added at this point to make things as easy to follow as possible. And again, these tests worked out fairly well. Money prizes would give roughly 3 times the cost amount per roll, or earn a single damage out point for their respective prizes. The random prize option also works, probably, because again my luck is really bad, so it was a little difficult to verify. Regardless, the Sandman was on my tail, so I had just about enough energy to add one more way to earn stuff: loot boxes. The loot box would work much like the slot function, including the use of an array. And for the time being, the prizes gained from loot boxes would be the same prizes that would be earned through the slot machine. That will change down the line, but for the sake of time and the energy that I had left, that was that. Another button was added, and thankfully the code worked. Loot boxes were now yet another way for players to obtain upgrades and prizes. And again, the contents of the loot box will change in due time. However, before we can add more to the loot boxes, we need to add more minigames, prizes, and ways for the player to spend their currency. Which, outside of the fact that I was basically a coding zombie at this point, is going to require a lot more time and energy. I'm talking some pretty significant additions that should really throw this concept for a loop. But those additions will have to wait, because this brings us to the end of today's session and this episode of Dev Diary. So if you enjoyed today's entry, consider leaving a like. Be sure to also subscribe and hit that bell if you haven't already, and let me know if this was the direction that you thought the project would go. And more importantly, do you think that this will be enough to address the idle nature of clicker games? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.